Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is now in theaters, and I find it ironic that this movie actually features an animatronic chicken, and yet a Minecraft movie is the one that got all of the good chicken memes. Life can be cruel sometimes. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. This review was originally scheduled to come out yesterday morning, but that was delayed because of Netflix's pending acquisition of Warner Brothers, which is its own kind of horror show. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 sees Emma Tammy returning to direct, with Scott Cawthon, the creator of the video game, going from co-writer to sole credited writer of the screenplay. If you were thinking that a sequel to the first film could use some outside perspective for the second movie, well, that didn't really happen. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 picks up about a year after the events of the first movie. Josh Hutcherson's Mike, the security guard who was terrorized in the last film, is trying to forget those events and continue to raise his younger sister Abby, played by Piper Rubio. But Abby is still attached to her animatronic friends from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and when she receives a message from them asking for help, she heads to the other location that we didn't know about, the original Freddy's, where all of the horror that we know so far originated. Elizabeth Lail also returns as Vanessa, the cop whose traumatized childhood continues to haunt her, and Matthew Lillard appears fairly briefly in flashbacks as Vanessa's father, William Afton, the deranged child killer who was unmasked in the last movie. The cast also includes Wayne Knight as a petty science teacher and Skeet Ulrich as a grieving father in a Scream reunion with Matthew Lillard. Unfortunately, the former Billy and Stu do not get to share any screen time. While prepping this review, I went back to watch my review of the first Five Nights at Freddy's film, and it reminded me that I thought that the original movie was a slog to get through, a very slow film, that it didn't really do much to explain what it is about this franchise that makes it so popular, and that it wasn't really scary enough, or frankly good enough, to win over anybody who didn't walk in a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's. Well, I guess you can give this franchise points for consistency, because generally, I shared a lot of those feelings about this movie as well. However, there has been some progress. Instead of 2/3 of the movie being an interminable slog like the first film, only about half of this one was. I disliked the first half of this movie about as much as any other movie this year, but the second half at least does something to show why this concept is fun and why using these characters in a movie could be fun, and dare I say it, it actually threatens to become fun on more than one occasion. I'm sure if I was invested in this lore and invested in these characters, I might like the second half of this film quite a bit, but it felt to me, as a non-game player, like somebody who maybe went to see Avengers Endgame and watched the second half of that movie, having not seen anything else in the MCU. I can see why people are entertained by this, and maybe are happy at certain characters that show up. I just can't really share that enthusiasm. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, though, did remind me of some not very good movies that I like, and the biggest one was Freddy vs. Jason. It is not a very good film, but I enjoy watching it because I like those characters, and I walked into that movie liking those characters. My guess is that a lot of game fans are going to like this movie even more than the first because it does up the ante on the animatronics and it does deliver several exciting sequences instead of just a few like the last movie. Reports indicate that this movie got a substantial budget upgrade from the first to the second film, and at least you can see it on the screen. I mean, they do put more resources and it is substantially bigger than the first movie. Some things, however, did not improve from movie 1 to movie 2. First of all, for a movie franchise that's based on a horror or survival horror video game, neither one of these movies are very scary. Yes, there are jump scares, but that isn't necessarily what makes a movie scary. This movie does deliver a creepy new antagonist, though, in the Marionette, an angry ghost out for revenge. I enjoyed some of those visuals, but those are few and far between. The acting also is not particularly outstanding, and a lot of times it's pretty bad. Josh Hutcherson in particular seems very unenthused about being there, though I have to give Wayne Knight credit because he appears to know exactly what kind of movie he's in. The script is not much better than the performances. There was one kind of punchline that is used by one of the animatronics as kind of a menacing serial killer line. It's not meant as an inside joke or a running joke, or at least I don't think it was, but they use it 3 different times in the movie, as if it was written into the script 3 times and somebody just forgot that it was there. This is also one of those franchise sequels that expands the lore of the world by just saying, oh yeah, that super important thing, that's been there the whole time. I guess I just forgot to mention it. That goes for the original Freddy's Pizza franchise, which is critical in this movie, and it also goes for a major character who's introduced and then kind of forgotten about and then just brought back in the 3rd act and been like, oh yeah, no, this guy's a huge deal. It stretches believability that it could not or would not have been mentioned. It's just convenient because when they were making the first film, they didn't know they were going to make a movie with this character in it. And yes, I understand how ridiculous it sounds to say that something stretches credibility and logic in a movie about killer pizza robots, but even I have my limits. I am sure that many people who are familiar with the games will be chiming in saying like, well, yes, but that's all established in the lore of the video games. They're just adapting what's already been written. But in the adaptation process from video game to screen, you do actually have to, adapt that stuff. You can't just throw it up on the screen without explanation unless you are only trying to appeal to pre-existing fans of the game. And I think that that's going to be a big argument that is used for people that liked this movie, particularly the people that played the games and are into the lore and the videos and grew up with these video games, that are going to say, well, this movie was made for the fans. I understand that, but I also just don't think it's very smart to only make it for the fans. You can absolutely make a movie for fans to appreciate, but both films now, I think, have been made to the exclusion of non-fans, and that's just giving up a huge opportunity to widen that fan base. The film also sets up what I thought was an interesting concept, which is a Freddy Fazbear festival, say that 3 times fast, where the townsfolk gather in cosplay and where the killer animatronics can blend in, but then they do almost nothing with it. And of course, the movie ends with a couple of blatant setups for a sequel, which, if this movie does as well at the box office as the original did, is almost definitely going to happen. The first Five Nights at Freddy's movie left me genuinely curious as to why people liked these characters in this franchise so much. This one at least gave me some idea of why that is, and I guess that's progress, but it still really didn't do anything to bring me into the fold. I will say that the animatronics, which are once again made by the Jim Henson Workshop, are even more impressive this time around, and the Workshop has really upped their game. It's been scaled up from the first film, so, the movie's got that going for it. And I did enjoy Five Nights at Freddy's 2 marginally more than the first one. The first half, like I said, I think is just as bad as I thought the last movie was, but the second half was entertaining enough that I stopped checking my watch every 5 minutes. But even though the second half of this movie is better than the first, it wasn't really enough to turn my opinion around on the movie as a whole. Like I said, my opinions of these 2 movies are pretty close to each other. Like the first movie, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 on my personal scale still gets a rating of not a fan, although it is somewhat closer to It's Fine territory than the last film was. Five Nights at Freddy's apparently has 11 games in the main continuity, so if they keep adapting those games and each movie is an incremental step better than the one before, then by movie 11, who knows? Maybe Five Nights at Freddy's will be a see it now franchise, just not right now. So those are my thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's 2. What do you think? Were you out after the first movie? Have you already seen the second movie? Do you agree that it's better than the first one, although not by much? Thanks so much for watching this review. Be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news. Of course, I'll be tracking everything going on with Netflix and Warner Brothers, as well as reviews, box office, awards, all that kind of stuff. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you're notified when I upload a new video. But most of all, thank you for spending your time with this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.